The Providence Journal invited 8 public officials to discuss race in Rhode Island, our series about the state's changing population, the gaps that have developed among the races, and the consequences for all of us. Their comments will help shape public policy and set the climate for how we treat each other. Governor, thank you very much for participating. We published a series of stories in the last year, Race in Rhode Island, that have found a number of things. The state's population is changing dramatically. At the same time, huge gaps have emerged among a number of areas: education, income, housing. There are consequences of those gaps for all of us. So we thought at this point of the project we would invite 8 state and local policymakers in to have a discussion. So that's where we are today. I'll ask the first question. What have you learned from the series?
First of all, I think it's been a great series. So kudos to the Providence Journal for recognizing what you just said, that this population has changed. And I think the series has been very comprehensive, which I've appreciated, because changes in race and race issues don't just affect just the economy or just education. One of the things that I found most interesting, and in some ways most troubling, was you did a piece or two on housing.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, I think it said that Rhode Island was the worst, or one of the worst in the country, in minority home ownership and the disparity between, home ownership in people of color and not. I didn't know that, I'll be honest, and so that was eye-opening for me, and definitely as a governor makes you think, what do I have to do? What more do we have to do in order to break down these barriers to equalize that disparity?
Ed, you have a question?
Well, let me just ask you about that, because you're right, we were dead last in the whole country, and the rate was 67% for whites home ownership, and just 32% for non-whites. Why do you think that is, and what do you think the state could do about it?
Yeah, some of it is income. I think that we clearly have a problem in disparity of income between people of color and white people. So some of it is that. Some of it is just access to opportunity, in terms of getting a good job. In order to be able to afford a house, you have to have a certain level of wages and income. But also, I think in terms of what we can do about it, like one of the state's agencies is Rhode Island Housing. And when I read that piece, I first thought to myself, how can I better use Rhode Island Housing to make housing more affordable for people of color in Rhode Island? And what are some programs that we can roll out in order to make it easier and bring down barriers? But look, I think also, and I'm not an expert in housing, racism exists. And you know about redlining, and if you look over time, banks have not always lent money and given mortgages on a completely equal basis to people of all races. So there's a certain awareness too that our lending institutions have to have, and maybe we need to roll out other lending programs, because most people do need a mortgage to buy a house, and banks have to make sure they're doing all they can to lend equally.
Paul, do you want to ask a question?
Sure. We did a review of data from the Education Department and found that Rhode Island schools are sharply segregated. In fact, 14% of them meet the definition of intensely segregated that's used by researchers. And these segregated schools perform worst on the standardized tests. So what can you do as governor to fix that?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think a couple things. One is enabling choice is obviously one way to do that. So for example, in the city of Providence, for charter schools, they have a citywide lottery. And I think that's a good thing. Encourages some amount of integration and choice, get people out of just their neighborhood. The other thing we need to do, I would say, I just launched yesterday a review of the funding, the way the state funds education. many reasons I did that. One of the things is we don't take into account English learners in that. So in places like Pawtucket, Central Falls, the majority of kids in those schools, English isn't their first language. So as you're thinking about spending money wisely in schools, the funding formula, I believe, has to be adjusted to do a better job of taking into account English language learners, getting the money and resources to those places so those kids can have the adequate resources that they need. But we're taking a hard look at the funding formula. It doesn't necessarily go to segregation per se, but a big part of it is making sure that, especially the urban core, where a lot of minorities live, have the resources they need to make sure the schools are great.
Should the level of segregation be part of the funding formula?
I don't know. I had never thought of that. I put together, it's an interesting question, and I just put together a group of 29 advisors to work on that with me to redo the funding formula. So it's something that I'll put out to the group for consideration.
The Senate President told us a couple of days ago, we've seen in the paper today, that the funding formula has to be revisited. And it's going to take $10 million more to make sure what you rob from the traditional districts when they send kids to the charter schools get made whole. That number sound right to you?
I don't know where she got that number, so I hesitate to say if that's right or not. It sounds roughly right, directionally right, though I'm not sure it's going to take more money. I'm not yet willing to say it's going to require more money. It might, but that's why I'm doing hard work over the next few months. What I'm more focused on is getting the most out of the money that we're spending. Right now, the state of Rhode Island sends about $1 billion a year to cities and towns to fund our public schools. That's a lot of money. On a per student basis, we're number 7 in the country. We spend more than Massachusetts, more than our neighbors, one of the top spenders per student, but we're middle of the pack at best for results. 29th for third grade and fourth grade scores, 29th for high school. So that's what I'm really interested in. It's not, I don't think, just more money. Why are we spending so much and yet we're middle of the pack? That tells me maybe we're not spending it right, on the right things as well as we can. So that's what I'm really focused on.
Good. Omar, do you have a question?
Well, Governor, a lot of issues about race relations is perception. In the state government, there are about 26 senior or cabinet level positions that has only 3 people of color. That's commendable, but it's small. And in the state employment, a lot of, almost about 2 or less than 3% are people of color employed at state level, and the state is the biggest employer. How are you going to change that?
Yeah.
When?
It's a great question. So, I think we've done, we're off to a decent start, I would say, in my administration. Of the folks I've hired in the executive branch, 25% are people of color. And of my appointments, about 20% are people of color. It's not good enough. We have to do more. But it's, as I say, I think we're off to a decent start. More than half are women. You raise an interesting point, which is also, that's the people that I could appoint. Within the ranks of state government, if you will, there's not a lot of turnover. There's a lot of people who've been there for a long time. The state personnel rules make it such that once you have a job, you tend to keep it for a very long time, and it's hard. It's a reasonably, how do I say this? It's not the youngest workforce in America. So some of these institutions make it difficult to hire new folks and diversity, which isn't an excuse, it's just a reality. So how do you fix it? The number one thing is I'm always looking for ways to be in the community to increase the pipeline, of talented people of color and women who apply. And as I say, we're trying. We got to do better. I always am looking for ways. I'm constantly out and about talking. I'm constantly reaching out to community groups saying, help me recruit, give me talent, give me the pipeline, broaden my pipeline. Right now, for example, there are vacancies on the judiciary for 3 judges, and just landed on my desk 15 names, and I can select from those 15 names for those 3 spots. There is not a single person of color on that list.
So what do you do?
So what I had to do is go back, there's a thing called the Judicial Nominating Committee, which is a committee that gives the governor names. They need to do a better job. They need to do more outreach in the legal community. I need to get out and get that message out, apply. We're trying to be creative, and I'm, I guess, challenging them to be creative, to say, you got to get me a better pipeline. You got to get out into the legal community and advertise, here's what the process is. Educate people. And also get the message out loudly and clearly that you don't need to know somebody in order to get one of these appointments. You can apply on your merit.
Just to follow up on that, we talked about the appointments back in June, and I quoted Jim Vincent at the time from the NAACP. He pointed out that the cabinet wields a lot of power in areas like education, and he noted that you were about to pick a new education commissioner at the time. And he said, so wouldn't it be good to have a person of color that understands the school-to-prison pipeline and the myriad issues that affect urban education and urban communities? So why didn't you take the opportunity to pick a qualified candidate who could make the cabinet more diverse in that area, like education?
Yeah, because I thought Ken was really the right guy for the time. I interviewed candidates. I did a nationwide search, and there's no question that, especially in public education, you want a team that reflects the students that you're teaching, which is more diverse than Ken, who's a white guy. But he's great. You know, I thought he was the right man for this time. He's a consensus builder. He's got a great track record. The prior commissioner did an excellent job, but I needed someone who could mend fences and be a consensus builder, and I thought he was the right guy for the moment.
You're right. 39% of the student body in Rhode Island is of color. And did you have any candidates that of color that you looked at for that position?
I did. We did look at a couple of people of color. But, you know, even more important than the commissioner is the teachers. The people, I think, the people that kids see every single day. And so we have to do a better job of encouraging and promoting and enabling diversity in the teacher ranks and the principal ranks, the school leader ranks. Because if a kid comes to school every day and doesn't see a single person in the school building that looks like them, I think that's actually even more important than the commissioner. Because I know myself, as a woman, having known women who I could see in positions, they were a lawyer, they were an executive, they were this, had an impact on me.
Well, do you have any means of increasing that percentage? I mean, you don't appoint the teachers.
No, but there's marketing, there's advertising, there's outreach. I do think a lot of this is outreach. I think a lot of it is getting into the community and saying, we want you to apply to be a judge, we want you to apply to be a teacher, we want you to apply on the state police. It's another area we got work to do on the state police. It's not nearly diverse enough. And I've talked to the colonel about that on many occasions, and he's good. And I'm working with him and pushing him to get out and encourage people to recruit people. It's the pipeline. To me, it's a pipeline issue. You got to get people knowing that, yeah, we want you.
And just to be sure, you said 15 candidates for a judicial position. Is that just one of the courts, or is that all the vacancies?
No. Just for it's the list that I just got for a Superior Court and District Court.
Okay. Because I thought there were a couple of candidates of color that the JNC just picked, but maybe it's for some of the other positions.
Yes, right.
But not for Superior and District.
Right. So the list that I just received, and I was just making an illustration, because it was top of mind because I just got it. The list I just received has no people of color on it. So we have a clear need to send a loud message into the community that we need more folks to apply.
Well, just to follow up on that, I know most of the people that are seen in the courts are people of color.
Yeah.
And, the prosecutors' choices do not reflect those people.
Right.
Will you commit now to appoint all those 3 people as people of color? And how you reach to them, probably that is something that the states would devise to reach out and get these people to apply. But can you commit to get those 3 positions to be people of color?
The 3 open spots
Yes.
right now? No, I cannot commit to that. Because first of all, as per law, I think I'm bound to pick from the list that they give me. And secondly, I commit to you, I'm going to pick the best people, the most qualified people who I think will be great judges. But I will commit to you that in the course of my 4 years as governor, I will appoint people of color to the bench, and I will work overtime to diversify the bench, and I will work overtime and get the JNC to do the same thing to increase the diversity of the pipeline. The way the process works, not to get into the weeds, I wasn't around as governor when they were putting these lists together so much. So now I'm new, and I'm going to try to say, come on guys, I need a better job. I need a bigger pipeline.
Yeah, because the criticism has been that governors have put a lot less emphasis on creating a diverse bench than using it as a bargaining chip with General Assembly leaders to get what they want in the budget or whatever. So, yeah, how important is a diverse bench to you?
I think it is important. It is important. But my top priority is a high-quality bench. Let's be clear. But I don't think those goals are at odds. I mean, we will find high-quality people with diversity. The bench needs more women. The bench, I would like it to be that at the end of my term, the bench will be a bit younger, a bit more diverse, and a bit more female. And maybe a lot, depending on how many vacancies come through in my time. And high quality, high quality.
And what are you going to say when they say, well, we've got a former legislator or an ally that we'd like to put in this magistrate or judge position?
Take everyone as it comes. If they're highly qualified and I think they'll be a terrific judge, then they might warrant the appointment.
Claudia, do you have something?
Yes, so Race RI basically has fostered many conversations which have been painful but needed. And
Yeah.
I think it has increased the cultural intelligence of readers and the community at large. What are some steps that could be taken to leverage that conversation that we're having?
Well, this discussion we've just been having about the judiciary, I think, is a good one. Hopefully, you guys, the coverage has been, I think, very comprehensive. And so it's raised everyone's awareness to these issues. And as governor, at any time, I have a number of decisions I'm trying to make, and I would love to leverage this. So, for example, I have to make judicial appointments. It clearly points out that we need more people to apply. Right now, I'm going through an exercise which we call the Justice Reinvestment. I put together a task force to make recommendations to me around how Rhode Island deals with criminal justice, probation, and parole. More than half the people in the ACI are not white. More than half the people. A disproportionate number of people on probation and parole are not white. So, and I've put a spotlight on that, and I put a group together, and I'm going to put a legislative package in next year to reform the way we do probation and parole as an outgrowth of this effort. But the work that the Providence Journal has done, enables this to happen. It raises awareness. Another program that I put in place is called Rhode Island's Promise, which is a scholarship fund. It provides last dollar scholarships for high school students. The majority of people so far that are taking those are women, and a very high percentage are people of color. These are people for whom you've got to break down barriers. College is expensive, so we want to help them. So the more awareness that, like this series raises awareness to those disparities in housing, in education, in income. And that enables or supports public leaders who are trying to make these changes.
Paul, back to you. Given the large majority of charter school students who are kids of color, how do you adjust the formula without harming them?
Well, you can't harm them. So let me say that the goal, many charter schools are doing a great job and are being innovative. So the goal is not to, hurt them. So whatever we do, we have to figure out not to do that. Other states do it, So how do you do it? And the way I'm trying to do it is you put smart people together. You look at the data. You look at the actual experience that we've had over the past 5 years. You look at Massachusetts, that has fantastic results, and you see if any changes are necessary. But we've got to be really careful because you don't want to destabilize what's working.
In June, Kevin Gallagher said, whatever your position is on the funding formula, it's preposterous that affluent communities are complaining that poor black and brown students are stealing their money. Is this debate over charter schools really because suburban whites don't want to pay for a quality education for urban kids of color?
Maybe some of it is that. I think, though, the reality is, and I probably am speaking as a parent when I say this, everybody wants to make sure their kid gets a good school and a fair shake. And there's anxiety, don't take the money away from my kid. Make sure my school's good. And I think that's natural. And that's actually why I'm looking at it. Like I say, it's been there for 5 years. We know what's working. We know it has to be changed. Sorry. So we ought to look at it.
The other day, someone dropped some anti-Semitic and racist flyers, leaflets, not far from where you live. And a few months ago, we had someone dropping racist leaflets in East Greenwich, and the year began with some anti-Muslim graffiti at a West Warwick Muslim school. So, what does all this tell you about racism in Rhode Island this year, or 2015? And how does the state respond to it?
Yeah. Well, look, I think the first thing is racism is alive and well. And we should realize that and not try to pretend that it's not. When you have half the people in your prison not white people, you have to say, we have a problem here, right? It's not working. So I think the first thing is to say, racism exists, it's unfair, prejudice exists, and we got to be on guard for that and have policies to try to correct that. The second thing is diversity is a good thing. This isn't, I say that all the time to my team. You make better decisions if you have diverse people around you. So we have to commit ourselves to say, diversity is good. In other words, it leads to better outcomes. And so it's a good thing to do, apart from the fact that it's a basic human right to be treated equally. I'm just saying it also makes our economy better. Like the other day, I rolled out a program for Latino business owners. Rhode Island's economy is stronger if Latino entrepreneurs are supported and flourish. It's good for them, but it's good for everybody in Rhode Island, for those businesses to flourish. So I think that's another thing. And then the final thing is we just have to break down barriers, right? Make sure, public schools, gotta work. Need a good public school. That's why I'm focused on that. I already talked about the scholarship program. A lot of people, the most striking thing to me, by the way, about this scholarship program so far, I've talked to bunch of young people who've received the scholarships. People I've talked to have all been people of color, actually, women and men. It's amazing to me how some of them just wouldn't be able to go to college but for this $1,000 scholarship. And you say to yourself, That's amazing. $800-900 means the difference between actually getting that degree and therefore having a good job and not. So, and that's those barriers of income inequality affect black people and brown people more than white people. So we've got to break down those barriers.
You mentioned the schools and the prisons. Like the ACLU just had the 17-page school to prison pipeline report in black and white, it was called. And it talked about how disproportionately blacks are suspended from school, stopped and searched by police, arrested, and incarcerated at ACI. So what did you make of the report, and what can you do about it?
Well, you know, one of the things I was very happy to sign as governor, it was a Community Policing Act, and we worked hard around that. I worked with the advocates and was pleased to play a role in getting it passed. But a lot of that is about just getting the data on all traffic stops.
Oh, yeah.
Right, the traffic stops. And also there was some other measures for better community policing. Some of it is just collecting the data and being honest with ourselves. Does racial profiling exist? And if it does, we got to stop it. The same thing too, you know, in schools with the suspension rate and whatnot. Look at the data. And if the data shows disparity that reflects racism, let's be honest about it and fix it.
Some of the law enforcement groups are against that bill that you mentioned on the racial profiling because it would prohibit consent searches of juveniles and pedestrians without the reasonable suspicion or probable cause. What did you say to people who oppose it?
Yeah, there are people that oppose everything. I just felt that, like I always do, the benefits outweighed the potential negatives, which is to say, we do have a problem in the administration of justice as it relates to people of color in America and in Rhode Island. And we got to take steps to fix it. So no bill is perfect, which is to say I'm not saying their concerns aren't legitimate, because I think they probably are. But I think the benefit of this kind of legislation outweighs the potential negatives.
You know, I stopped by the Ryback dinner on Monday where you spoke. I looked at the crowd, all white.
Yeah.
And these people of color there. I just heard you talk about Latino entrepreneurs. We have pockets of Latino entrepreneurs. We have a black business association. We have a white power structure, white business structure. What's the role of the governor, who's committed to the economy, to pull those groups together for one economic force? And I guess, Governor, what are you doing to pull those together?
Yeah.
I don't see it.
Yeah, well, if you had been at our event the other day at Los Andes, you would have seen the place was packed with Latino business owners and entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And we launched the website. We have new tools for that program. You would have seen activity there. I'm also just about to launch a small business loan fund, because if you talk, as I've done, to Latino businesses or black-owned businesses, and you say, what are the barriers? There's a couple things that always come up. One is mentorship, and so that's what we started to address, and the other one is capital, a lack of access to capital. And so that's why we're starting this small business loan fund. Some of them are microloans. That program, I think, will disproportionately help minority-owned businesses. And that's how we're advertising it. And actually, that we said that at that forum. You mentioned the Black Business Association. They helped us to craft it. They came and testified for it. They're going to help us to get the word out to the community. So I would say we are doing some of that.
The other thing small business people talk about is minority set-aside law. And I know that the event we were at in May, they talked about enforcing the existing set-aside law. I just have two questions. Are you in favor of minority set-aside laws? And do you think the law isn't being enforced, and if so, why not?
Tell me the law you mean specifically.
Sets aside a certain number of state contracts,
Yeah, okay.
specifically for women and minority-owned business. And the idea is because of this network created in commerce, if you can't break into it, you
Right.
have a benefit from it.
Yeah. So the state has one
Yeah.
and has done a terrible job, honestly.
Uh-huh.
It's, and we got to do better. I do support it. And I put some new people in that unit, and I have personally been involved in saying to them, what do we have to do? I got to fix this. And so we're working on that. Some of it is we have to make the system much easier to apply. Frankly, some of it, in that case, I don't think is prejudice. It's just government bureaucracy. It's too complex to apply. So we're streamlining the application process, and that is a priority of mine because it's embarrassing. So we're going to fix it. We will fix that.
Who's next, Ed?
Part of the discussion about race this year, it's been national, has been talking about white privilege. And so we had an op-ed the other day from a former Senate Majority Leader, David Collin, who's now a professor at CCRI, and he was saying if the average black is worse off than the average white in almost every category of well-being, health, wealth, income, education, high culture, gainful employment, etc., this is chiefly because of an appallingly dysfunctional subculture that is pervasive among the black lower classes. So what do you agree or disagree with Carlin, and what does white privilege mean to you?
I strongly disagree. I think that is wrong. I disagree strongly. I didn't see it at the time, but just based on what you just read to me, I would strongly disagree with those statements. White privilege is so many things, right? It's easier to get a loan for a first mortgage if you are white than if you are poor, black, and come from a poor neighborhood. It's every time somebody looks at you, they form an opinion. And many times, if you're a person of color, people immediately, subconsciously or consciously, form opinions about you based on stereotypes. There is no way you can look at the facts of the incarceration rate, the parole rate, the probation rate, the income disparity, and think that there's not prejudice against black and brown people and prejudice in favor of white people. And we just haven't done enough to break down those barriers. And if what he means, I don't even know what he means by subculture, so I don't even know what that means, but look, maybe what he means is, it is a fact that if you go to certain areas of high poverty and high concentrations of non-white people, yeah, you're going to see high crime. You're going to see dilapidated buildings. That's not because those people are black or brown. It's because they're poor and their schools aren't working and the infrastructure's falling apart. And if we did a better job of making Rhode Island a place of opportunity where everyone has equal access to the opportunity, I don't think you'd have, these pockets, if that's what he means.
Just to follow up, one other part of the debate here in Providence has been when we had that teenager up at Dunkin' Donuts, so even discussion at the Dunkin' Donuts where he wrote Black Lives Matter on a police officer's coffee cup, and the FOP got upset, and Tony the dancing cop said it should be Blue Lives Matter, and it was a Black Lives Matter rally. So, who's writing that debate, or how do we move forward?
Yeah. Look, clearly the person who wrote that is angry, I would say. This is what I think. They're angry and frustrated and trying to be heard. And, is the right way to do that in that customer service environment? Probably not. But what I think is, why is it that we have so stifled the voices of black people that they feel the only way to be heard is to speak out in that way? And I think there's justifiable anger and frustration because we've stifled the voices and they're not being heard. We deny racism. We sit people write what you just read to me. And as long as we keep doing that, we're not going to move forward. So we have to say, Black Lives Matter, Brown Lives Matter. Let's face it, we're doing a bad job, and let's make changes.
Omar, do you have a follow-up there?
Well, I read in the papers, I think, precisely the Providence Journal, that you are willing to accept Syrian refugees here. A refugee, actually, they found a refugee dream center. and we happen to work with refugees every day. And we know if the government accepts more refugees, we're going to have at least a double of the number we have in Rhode Island. That involves a lot of money going into these communities, but also to tackle the increase or the double number that is coming to Rhode Island. How will you handle it budgetarily?
Budgetarily. Yeah, so what I said actually at the time was that I would follow the federal government's lead, and this was a federal issue, but that if the federal government called upon Rhode Island to do our share, we stood ready to do that. I think that's the right thing to do. You know, just to welcome, Rhode Island's going to do its part, and it's just a human rights issue. And we would have to find the money if we were called upon to do that. And hopefully the federal government would, if we were asked, then the federal government hopefully would supply some of the money. Also, there's a lot of people who I think would open their homes. You know, shortly after I made that statement, people started reaching out to me personally. There's a temple at the end of my street, and some of the women from the temple walk by my house and they're like, Governor, we'll do our part. You know, our temple will take some people in. At my church, the priest said, we'll take some people in. I think people of Rhode Island would open their hearts and homes if we asked them to.
Paul?
What's the role of the governor in dealing with these issues of race in Rhode Island?
I think it's twofold. The role, part of it is just policies that provide opportunity for everyone. To be a governor that makes sure schools work for everyone, the economy works for everyone. Now, I raised the minimum wage, I expanded the earned income tax credit, providing scholarships. That's practical solutions to provide opportunity. Justice Reinvestment Act, practical policies to provide opportunity for everybody, break down barriers. And then I think the governor, you know, the governor has the governor has the bully pulpit. You know, the governor is elected by all the people and has a special ability, I think, to listen to people and talk to people. And voicing values or priorities is a big part of it. And I take that seriously.
Claudia, do you have another one?
I wanted to ask about that related to people that's in denial, who don't believe that it is racism or that they perhaps are racist and they don't realize it. So I was just wondering how do you think you can be heard by those people that perhaps are also in the General Assembly and holding powerful positions? How would you influence change at that level?
You know, some of it is just is talking and saying it. You know, people need to hear the governor saying those things. I think there's a value to that, just asserting these things. Some of it is just me being in the community. So, for instance, over the next few months, I'm spending time in churches, just talking to churches in the community, a Haitian church, Latino church. People need to see their governor. I'm the governor of everybody. I'm the people's governor, all the people. If you go into a Haitian church, which is all black people, I'm the governor. I'm their governor just as much as I am, you know, the all-white church on the east side of Providence. I think that is important as well. You know, I try to go to all the Latino festivals, Peruvian, Dominican, Puerto Rican. I do my best to get around and be there. Again, saying, I'm your governor too. And what I always say at those cultural events is, you guys make Rhode Island better. Having whatever it is, the Haitian community, Bolivian community, Peruvian community, makes Rhode Island better. Diversity is a good thing, not a bad thing. Let's not be afraid of it. It's a good thing. It's also a youthful thing. You know, if you look at the demographics of Rhode Island, I worry. What do I worry about? I worry we need to create more wealth for people. I want to raise the median income in Rhode Island. I want to worry about that, and I worry about the demographics. We need younger people, and like the Latino community is growing faster than other communities and is younger. And that is a good thing for Rhode Island.
You have time for a couple more.
Just one last question about, you mentioned the Latino community, and to come back to the question about the cabinet. I remember when we talked about it in June, there was 3 of 26 members of the cabinet were people of color, 1 Latino, and then Pablo Rodriguez has said he received a lot of support from the Latino community in the campaign, and he was hoping that there would be more appointments. He said it's a work in progress.
Yep.
So has it been progress since June? Is it still 3 of 26?
I don't know if I've done any more appointments. Have I done more appointments? I don't think I've done more appointments.
You said the number was like around 20.
Yeah. In total, it's 20% and 25% for my executive staff. But, you know, we're hiring all the time, and I don't know it. I don't want to compare. I don't know that particular point in time, and if
Okay.
have I made
Yeah.
progress
What do you
specifically.
say to Pablo? He says you had a lot of support from the Latino
Yeah,
community.
I say
You'd
we're
like to see
working on
more
it.
positions.
You know, I say we're working on it. I say I promised to roll out a program in the Commerce Corporation for Latino entrepreneurs. I've done that. I say we got the Last Dollar Scholarship Program done, and many of the people taking advantage of that are Latino. The young woman I talked about actually was from the Dominican Republic. So I'd say it still is a work in progress.
Governor, Dr. Alexander Scott was here earlier in the week. We talked a lot about our health equities program, this mini program in 11 cities around the state. The same day she was here, she told us she gets $2.5 million, I think, for that from the federal government. On the front page of the paper that day, we had $56 million in economic and development incentives, $20 million for school buildings. So my question is, if we're really interested in closing the health equity gap, does she need more money? Does she need more resources?
That's a good question. That money was from the federal government.
Right.
I think possibly. You know, the health department, which is what she runs, the vast majority of the money actually comes from the federal government and has been consistently cut. And it would be yes, is the short answer. I mean, I wish we could get access to more of those funds, but it's kind of a hard thing to do. So she's being creative. You know, we're trying to be as creative as we can. Like the health equity zones, I was proud of that. I've supported that, enabled that. We're I think the first or second state in the country to do it. And I believe that program will help people of color, because a lot of it is asthma, obesity, diseases that disproportionately impact African Americans.
Good. We have time for just 2 more. Omar, and then maybe Paul will finish up.
But I just wanted to ask if, for the purpose of legacy, if you were to champion one thing about race relations or improvement of the lives of people of color, would you say make community college free? Because that is most accessible for most people in the inner city.
Gosh, I would love to be able to do that. It's funny you said that. The program I started this year is called Rhode Island's Promise, and on account of that program, half of the students at CCRI are going for free. So my first year I got to half. I would love to be able to get the full way. And the honest answer is it's a budgetary reality. You know, we're still in deficit land in Rhode Island. So what I'm trying to do is cut where we can and invest. And it is a very high priority of mine to be able to get that done. I'd like to be able to do that from, like I say, I made a big dent this year. I'm going to keep going for sure. And it would be an awesome thing if we could have it be free for everybody by the time I leave my first term.
Paul?
None of these issues we've talked about here today are new.
Yeah.
Why is it that people of color have always lagged whites in Rhode Island?
Everywhere, probably. It's not just Rhode Island. You know, I think we've never fully committed ourselves to being honest about the problem and prioritizing it. And unfortunately, politics does get in the way. You know, I'm thinking of some proposals now, for example, in the education world. It is absolutely true that a little bit of investment saves the state lots of money if you keep somebody out of prison or whatnot. And so we just have to be more focused on making those smart investments. And maybe it does take some more money in the short run to make those investments. I'm not sure anyone has the answer to that. The most troubling thing for me, though, is how little progress we've made. Like, I'm not sure it's any better. That is the most troubling thing. And that's why I think it's great you're doing the series. I mean, I think it's great you're doing the series and devoted so many resources to it. Because that's probably what it's going to take, like a all hands on deck focus. It does seem to be the case that norms change and policies change in times of crisis. And hopefully this will be a moment that we can all rally around this issue and finally start to move things forward.
Do you think government and the institutions of government have been part of the problem?
Oh, absolutely.
How do we change
Absolutely.
that?
Well, look, some of it is like the housing example that we talked about. Rhode Island Housing needs to do better in making sure that the money that we provide so people can become homeowners gets into the hands of people that aren't white. Like, I'll tell you how, I'll give you a perfect example, and this is things I think about. One of the other programs I've rolled out since being governor is we call it the Ocean State Grad Grant. Essentially what it is if you're a recent college graduate, I want to keep young people here and college graduates here. So if you're a college graduate and you agree to work in Rhode Island and buy a house in Rhode Island, we'll give you a $7,000 down payment. It helps you buy a house. It's a forgivable loan. When I read the paper, I said, okay, what do I have to do to make sure that a fair share of that money gets into the hands of people that aren't white? And that's what we have to do. Because that's how you make progress, right? Then if you say, we helped enough people buy their first home and now they're in Rhode Island, that's progress.